Hey guys, and welcome to Solar Cabin Channel. Hey, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but tomorrow, the 8th of April, a huge dragon is going to fly through the sky and consume the sun, and humans will be sacrificed. Okay, that is actually based on historical facts of the first eclipse that was recorded back in about 3000 BC, by the Chinese. And that was their belief of what happened during a full eclipse, a total eclipse. They believed that a dragon was consuming the sun. And according to the historical legend of that time, they went out with drums and gongs and they banged them really loud to scare the dragon so it would go across the sun and not consume it. And when the sun came back up and appeared after the dragon moved across, then they all celebrated and got drunk and smoked opium. No, I don't know about that last part. I made that last part up. Okay, so there's been a lot of mythology, religion, and history and science all tied up into solar eclipses. And tomorrow, on the 8th of April, we are going to experience an eclipse in the United States. Now, it won't be everywhere. Not everywhere in the world is going to see this eclipse. What makes this an unusual and rare event is because this will be a total eclipse, and we'll get into a little bit of the science of eclipses and what can happen during an eclipse, both from a sociological and a science perspective, because it's a really interesting spectacle. Scientific spectacle that a lot of scientists, NASA and all of them are all going to be studying for different reasons, but it's something that you will also be able to see, though you shouldn't look at it directly. If you're in the United States, at least a partial eclipse, you may be able to see a full eclipse. Now, some historical perspective. Like I said, the first recorded eclipse in China was around 3000 BC. Because there wasn't a lot of understanding of what caused it, they put a lot of mythological or religious or spiritual and sometimes some dangerous beliefs connected to what an eclipse could do. Now, they weren't the only ones. All through our history, there are recorded events of people who panicked and freaked out because of eclipses. Now, we do know that some cultures, like the Incas, they have a history of human sacrifices and animal sacrifices for a lot of different reasons. They seem to be a people that sacrifice people for any reason they could get away with. So we do know that the Incas did have a belief in a sun god, which a lot of religions and cultures did back in the days, back in history. And the Incas apparently, when the eclipse, which came around very rarely, happened, the leaders of that time would use it as a sign that they needed to do something to stop it, or the sun would be completely consumed, they'd all be in darkness, and everybody would die. So they would sacrifice animals and probably humans as a result of an eclipse. Now, tomorrow, on the 8th, is going to be a eclipse, and there are conspiracy theorists out there that believe that it could lead to another mass human sacrifice. Now, that really isn't likely, but there is some real dangers as a result of a total eclipse, which I will talk about, because it could result in people dying as a result of the eclipse. So we'll get into that. So what an eclipse is: when the sun, which is farther away from us than the moon, when the moon travels in front of the sun and it's in line with the earth, you get an eclipse. Now, generally that is a partial eclipse. We don't generally see a total eclipse very often, but about every 18 months, the moon travels in front of the sun and we get an eclipse somewhere on the earth. Now, remember that the earth, about 70% of the earth is covered in water. So most of the time, this eclipse is going to happen over the oceans and nobody's going to see it unless you happen to be in a ship in the right direction that you might actually see an eclipse. Most of the time, it is not going to be over a landmass, and so most of us are not going to see an eclipse. Now, the last eclipse that we've seen here in the United States was in 2017. Some of you may remember a certain president standing on a balcony looking at it. Not a good idea. A real good way to damage your eyesight is by looking directly at an eclipse. Of course, maybe that is a way that we eliminate some people that just aren't smart enough to. Darwin's way of eliminating people that aren't smart enough to not stare at the sun, even in an eclipse. Okay, besides the point. You are going to be able to see it. Now, remember I said don't look at it directly. If you live in the contiguous United States, you will see at least a partial eclipse. Some areas are going to see a total eclipse, and you can go and look at the maps online and see where you are and where your state is. Up here in the Rockies, we're only going to see about a 50% eclipse. If you're in areas along Texas and some of the places east of that, you're going to see more of a total eclipse. Another reason this eclipse is different than the 2017 eclipse is that eclipse was at a certain angle that only a small portion of the eastern seaboard, DC and around that area, got to see the eclipse. Most of us didn't see the eclipse at all in the United States in 2017 because it's coming from a perspective that is going to completely cover the United States. All of us are going to see at least some portion of an eclipse. Like I said, we'll see 50% here. So that makes this eclipse unusual, something that will probably only happen in another 350 years, where most of the United States are going to be able to see this eclipse. And also what makes this eclipse unusual is because the Earth is not completely round. It is actually at what they call an ellipsoid. It has higher and lower places on the surface of the Earth. The moon sits between us and the sun. When the Earth is rotating around, there are times when the moon is going to be closer to the Earth than it is at other times. That is actually what causes the tides on the Earth, is because the gravity of the moon is actually pulling on the water surface of the Earth as it travels around, and because there are places that are higher and lower on the surface of the Earth, it causes that water to move to one side. That's called the tide on one side, and then it moves back to the other side. Okay, so the moon causes our tides. Now, what is special about this eclipse is the moon is going to be closer to the Earth than it was in 2017, at the same time that it is going to cross in front of the path of the sun. You know that things that are closer to you look bigger, okay? So the moon is going to look bigger in the sky during this eclipse and cover more of the sun, depending on where you are in your elevation. It's going to cover more of the sun to make it even more of a total eclipse. Now, this is really important for scientists because this will allow them to actually look at the mass ejection, which is going to be the flare that's coming off. Here's the sun. The flare is going to be coming off behind it. They're going to be able to see this mass ejection coming behind the moon. And so they're going to be studying that. Scientists are going to be studying this for a long time. They get a lot of data out of something like this. And you'll remember in my previous videos, I did a segment on EMPs, electromagnetic pulses, because we are in a mass spectral unit where our sun is producing a flare, a solar flare, in the direction of the Earth. And so the solar flares are being increased now for the next 2 years. I've talked about this in another video. So we could see some really spectacular effects coming from this eclipse that will be a result of the moon is going to appear larger because it's closer to the Earth, and we're having a mass EMP or flare from the sun. If we happen to get it, we could get some really great coronal ejections from the sun. So that's a pretty neat thing. But just like in history, there are some dangers still. There are some conspiracy theorists out there that still believe that this eclipse is enough that's going to cause a mass sacrifice of humans. Now, you may say, oh, those are nut jobs, and they're the same people that believe the Earth is flat. Okay, but there is actually some basis of truth to that, because the reason is a whole lot of people in the United States are going to be traveling to the areas to watch this eclipse, especially around Texas and places like that. They're already traveling there. They've been traveling there for weeks, sometimes even months, to get there so they can get the best spot to see this total eclipse. So what's going to happen tomorrow is there's going to be a whole lot of people trying to use their phones to videotape, and they're going to be sending out communications, and there's a real danger that it could overload the communication systems, the cell phone systems, the satellites. That could cause possible deaths. because if someone is having an emergency, a heart attack or something like that, and they can't call to get an ambulance to them, people can die as a result of not being able to communicate at a time when they need the help, because so many people are overloading the communication systems, trying to take videos and live stream and call their friends and everybody about the eclipse. Another cause of deaths that will happen as a result of this eclipse will probably be on freeways and highways and roads where people get distracted because they're driving and they see the eclipse. They're not paying attention. You have a mass pile up on a highway, ends up and results in deaths as a result of the eclipse. All right. Now, we wouldn't call that intentional human sacrifice, but it certainly is something to consider. Maybe you want to be a little bit safer. I would say stay off the roads, and also don't do any damage to your eyes by staring into the sun like some people did. There are ways that you can safely look at the eclipse using what they call a pinpoint projector. They don't recommend holding your phone up and watching it directly because it can damage the phone if you do that. There are screens, there may be even apps out there that you can use to watch the eclipse, and the eclipse is going to start somewhere around 11 o'clock in New Mexico and end sometime around 1 o'clock across the rest of the United States. In my area, it's going to be about 11:25 or 11:30. I think we're going to see the eclipse here. I'm hoping to go out and take a look at it, and I will report back what I see on my channel. But, just be aware that there could be some dangers if you're traveling to try and see it. If you know about what time the eclipse is going to hit, I would suggest getting off the roads at that time and staying out of traffic, because it could cost some lives if people are distracted and not paying attention and overreact to an eclipse. Now, how long the eclipse will last? This is also unusual. The eclipse in 2017 only lasted about a little over 2 minutes. Now in 2024, tomorrow, it is expected to last a little bit longer than 4 minutes. So that's going to be a good long time when that moon is traveling in front of the sun, that you're going to be able to see at least a partial or possibly total eclipse. All right, folks, I think it's interesting. If you want to go find out more, of course, there's a lot online about how you can go and view the eclipse safely, where it's going to be, at what time for your area in the United States. Have a great day, folks.